Few concepts in modern science have had as wide and as deep an impact as that of the atom. Physics, chemistry, biology, geology, meteorology, medicine, ecology, even psychology and anthropology count knowledge of the atom as basic data, part of the bedrock foundation upon which their science is built. Here is what we know today.
1. All things on Earth are made of atoms. All material things, that is. Trees and stones, birds and lakes, frogs and people. All things, no exceptions.
2. Atoms are very small, so small that in a single drop of seawater there are 50 billion atoms of gold. Yet you would have to distill 2,000 tons of seawater to get enough gold to see with the naked eye.
3. Atoms, or combinations of atoms called molecules, are continually in motion, and that motion is what we call heat.
Atoms that make up the balmy air of a summer day, for instance, are traveling at speeds 3 times greater than that of a bullet leaving the muzzle of a rifle. And they collide with their neighboring atoms and molecules over 5,000 million times a second. Only as you approach the coldest possible temperature in the universe, 273 degrees below 0 centigrade, do the atoms quiet down and come to rest. Even then they quiver inside, because 4 atoms, small as they are, have an inner structure as intricate and finely tuned as the most elegant watch. An atom is not a little billiard ball, nor is it a miniature solar system as formerly thought. It does have an incredibly small, incredibly dense nucleus, which is surrounded by clouds of electrons.
To give you some idea of proportion, if we were to enlarge the tiny atom up to the size of Yankee Stadium, the dense nucleus would be like a mosquito on second base.
The atom's nucleus has positive electrical charges, while the electrons around it have negative electrical charges. The differences between one kind of atom and another are due to differences in the number and the arrangement of these electrical charges. 5. All the ordinary and extraordinary chemical changes in our world, from burning wood to digesting food, from making steel to thinking thoughts, are due to changes in the orbiting electrons, as bonds are made and broken between one atom and another. 6. Other kinds of changes in the movements of the atom's electrons produce radiation, including visible light and electricity. 7. All the ordinary and extraordinary nuclear changes in our world, from atomic power plants to cancer radiation therapy, from atomic explosions to solar energy, are due to arrangements and rearrangements of the dense atomic nucleus. Now that's a summary. Now let's see how these well-established facts help us understand the world.
We'll start with chemistry. Practically all chemical knowledge today has in its bedrock foundation atomic theory. The chart behind me is a periodic table of the elements, which you will find in all chemistry classrooms and chemical laboratories. Why? Because it's the master chart of all that exists in the material universe.
It starts in the upper left-hand corner with the simplest of atoms, hydrogen, element number 1. Hydrogen has just 1 unit of positive charge in its nucleus. Next comes helium with 2 charges, followed by lithium with 3, beryllium with 4. And we keep adding 1 charge each time right on through the entire 100-plus elements on the chart. There are no gaps nowadays. Everything is made of some combination of the 100-plus kinds of elements on this remarkable chart.
Think what an extraordinary simplification this is. The universe itself in just over 100 flavors. Actually, only about 90 of these flavors have been found in nature. The rest have been created in our modern chemical laboratories.
But wait. What does artificial mean? Mendelevium, for instance, has not yet been found in nature outside the laboratory, but the 101 protons, 155 neutrons and 101 electrons that make up mendelevium are no different from the protons, neutrons, and electrons that make up the other elements. All elements, in other words, are made of the same parts. So if mendelevium is ever found in nature outside the laboratory, we're quite sure it will be identical to the mendelevium we have made in our laboratory.
So too with other chemical substances. Sugar, for instance, it's always made of exactly the same number and kind of atoms. For sucrose, the kind of sugar that you have on your table, it's always made of 12 atoms of carbon, 22 atoms of hydrogen, and 11 atoms of oxygen, stuck together exactly in the angles and geometry shown here. Many green leaves know how to make this kind of arrangement of atoms. Snapdragon leaves, corn leaves, maple leaves, beans, all sprouts.
We can also make this same arrangement of atoms in the laboratory, artificially. And there would be absolutely no difference between the natural and the artificial. Why should there be? We use the same atoms in making sugar that the corn leaf does. And for that matter, our laboratories are as natural, that is, made of the same elemental atoms, as the corn leaf. More detailed and sophisticated knowledge of the electron shells surrounding each atom has led to more detailed and sophisticated predictions of how atoms will bond to one another. We know, for instance, not only that water is made of molecules of H2O, but we know the angle at which the two hydrogen atoms are attached to the one oxygen atom. Now, knowing this angle enables us to predict correctly what water will do in an almost infinite variety of physical and chemical reactions with other atoms and molecules. So too with the most interesting of all atoms, carbon. Carbon has 6 protons and 6 electrons. These electrons are positioned in their clouds such that a single carbon atom is able to make up to 4 separate bonds with other atoms. If it bonds with other carbon atoms in one way, it makes super slippery graphite. That's the lead in your lead pencil. If it bonds another way, it can make the hardest substance in the world, a diamond. And scientists at General Electric figured out how to make the bonds change, that is, how to make graphite into a diamond. But for carbon, this is only the beginning. Carbon can hook up with itself in short or long chains, can branch, can turn into circles, can add other atoms to the corners, and make an almost unlimited number of substances, from sugar to gasoline, from plastics to vitamins, from glue to hemoglobin. Carbon can also make this, the crowning achievement of life, DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, a double helix molecule of thousands of atoms strung along carbon-linked struts that contains on its spiraling structure the information needed to produce and to control living things. Well, if modern chemistry is built on the bedrock of atomic theory, so too is modern electronics. In fact, chemistry, electronics, and physics are all becoming more and more interconnected as our web of atomic theory becomes ever more powerful. When the electron was first discovered in J.J. Thomson's Cavendish laboratory at the turn of the century, someone raised a toast to the useless electron, long may it be so. If only they could visit a modern electronics store. It is true that the telegraph, the telephone, radio, and the phonograph were all invented before we knew there was such a thing as an electron. But now that we know more basic science, progress and invention have multiplied 100-fold. Research on the behavior of atomic electrons in the presence of light, for instance, has led to modern photovoltaic cells, like the ones in this solar calculator, that are able to transform light into electricity with no movable parts. The same direction of research has led to new glass fibers that are able to replace huge copper cables and carry messages around the world on the wings of light. And indeed to the miracle silicon chips, the heart and soul of the modern computer. Very recently, in the late 20th and early 21st century, scientists have made spectacular progress in what is called the science of nanotechnology. Nano means very small. Technology, that is, at the atom size level. This scientist at IBM, for instance, has already shown how it is possible to control a single atom, moving the atom at the will of the human being to form structures one atom at a time. This scientist at the University of Arizona has found a way to build a new molecule of carbon called Buckminster fullerene, buckyballs for short. And other scientists have been able to make nanotubes of carbon, the most important of the basic life forms. Just as the molecule DNA can direct the activities of a cell, including the reproduction of that cell, so scientists are now trying to design molecules, often with the life-centered carbon at their core, that can count and even reproduce themselves, making for the possibility of nanocomputers. These amazing computers would be microscopic in size, able, for instance, to flow through the bloodstream of a person and do special jobs inside. Jobs like finding and destroying malignant cancer cells, or jobs like finding and fixing defective kidneys, or hearts, or lungs, or spines. Jobs like growing new limbs, or ears, or fingers. These nanocomputers will be able to do these specialized jobs because they can be programmed with the codes needed to work on this basic atomic molecular level. Similar in a way to the way nature has coded living structures for over 4 billion years. Well, the electron part of the atom is glamorous and popular. The nucleus, however, is haunted by fear and suspicion, yet now and then glowing with promise of a new world. And not only a new world of unlimited energy, but a world of boundless knowledge and humbling wisdom. Indeed, a way to explain creation itself. Well, let's look at some of the progress already happening in the early 21st century. In order to study the nucleus of an atom that's 10 million times smaller than the atom as a whole, in order to intelligently search for these elusive quarks and antiquarks, humans have to use very powerful tools.
One of the most powerful is the circular mile-long accelerator here at Fermilab in Batavia, Illinois.
Now, the forces we are dealing with in the atom's tiny nucleus are strong. So strong that Fermilab's giant atom smasher needs more electrical power than a city of 300,000 people to break and then see what happens. Only a few years ago, we thought the nucleus was made up of protons and neutrons, held together by some kind of cosmic glue. In trying to figure out more about that glue, we have run into more mysteries. The most accepted current idea is that protons and neutrons are themselves made of still smaller, simpler particles called quarks. And these quarks come in at least 4 flavors, as well as having opposite antiquark shadows. Well, you remember at the beginning of this program, we said all things on Earth and in the universe are made of atoms, all material things, that is. And atoms, we found out, are made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But recent research at places like Fermilab has shown that protons and neutrons are themselves made of quarks, which leads to the view that there really seem to be only 2 basic kinds of particles in the universe: quarks and electrons. Well, yes and no. More puzzles. Puzzle number 1, cosmologists, that is, physicists who work on the largest possible canvas, the universe, have been able to estimate how much matter there is in all the stars, in all of space, in fact, in all of the universe. That is, how many quarks and electrons. And the problem is that their best estimate comes up way short of what is needed to keep the universe from flying apart. In fact, roughly 90% of the mass needed is missing. Well, what accounts for this missing mass? Where is it? What is it? Now, puzzle number 2, physicists who study the submicroscopic atom have found that in certain radiation changes, a neutron spits out an electron when it turns into a proton. But more energy goes into this exchange than comes out, and this violates one of the most fundamental of all physical laws, the law of conservation of energy. The only solution seems to be to invent another basic particle. So to solve this puzzle, physicists did invent a particle that had energy but no mass. Enrico Fermi called this strange particle a neutrino, Italian for the neutral one. Well, in 1956, the neutrino was indeed discovered, coming out of a nuclear reactor. And strange as it was, they did seem to be particles with energy but no mass. Well, more experiments in the last half of the 20th century have confirmed the existence of the strange particle. Neutrinos stream out of the sun in incredible numbers, and they pass right through us. Indeed, they pass right through the entire solid planet Earth, very, very rarely disturbing or running into anything. Huge underground water tanks have been built in many places around the world and under the ocean in the past few decades to try to detect and to study these neutrinos. And in one underground water tank here in Japan, new data in 1998 brought a surprise. Neutrinos do have a mass after all, a very small one, about 1/500,000th the mass of an electron. It's very small, yes, but if confirmed, this may help solve the puzzle at the other end of the scale. That is, the missing mass of the universe. Doing a little arithmetic, cosmologists figured that since space has about 300 neutrinos in every teaspoonful, we may have found at least some of the missing mass of the universe. On this view, it seems that empty space is not really empty. It's a veritable sea of neutrinos with a few quarks and electrons floating around to make up the stars and the planets and people. As you can see, the future of atomic research for the next decades is unpredictable. Despite the uncertainties, however, knowledge of basic particles does pay off. We do know how to control some of these strong nuclear forces in nuclear chain reactions, to explode in bombs, of course, but also to create electricity. All current nuclear power is produced by fission, that is, by the splitting apart of heavy nuclei, like uranium and plutonium. Unfortunately, these fission reactions lead to serious radioactive waste problems. At many sites around the world, scientists are right now learning how to control nuclear forces to produce energy from fusion reactions, that is, from fusing light nuclei, like hydrogen and helium. Once they solve the puzzles here, there will be a welcome new energy source to safely replace fossil fuels. A very powerful source indeed that will not contribute to global warming or to air or to water pollution, and one that could be used to produce the hydrogen economy that many think is the future of transportation in this 21st century. Many people do not know the many other human uses of nuclear energy either. Cancer, for instance, is being treated with growing success by the use of what are called radioisotopes. Radioisotopes are varieties of certain atoms whose nuclei spontaneously break apart. In that nuclear decay, the atoms spit out energetic particles that can seek out and destroy fast-growing cancer cells. Or here's another use. Ecologists use tiny amounts of a radioactive isotope as a way of tracing the flow of chemicals through the environment, as a way of collecting basic data needed to understand and control pollution. And in modern genetics laboratories, radioactive atoms are used as signposts to lead the way into the mysteries of the gene, that is, into the mysteries of life itself.
None of these uses, nor 100,000 others, were foreseen by the lonely investigators who first probed the secrets of the atom. It's always that way. But practical results, some people call them spin-offs, always seem to happen when basic scientific research is successful.
And right now, the research on the atom is proceeding rapidly at each extreme of size, the very small and the very large. At places like Fermilab, giant accelerators are probing the very small, and out in space, NASA satellites are probing the very large. For instance, we know that deep within stars like our Sun, there is a nuclear furnace and forge. We know that in that furnace, protons, electrons, quarks, mesons, and all the improbable particles and fragments of particles we are just beginning now to discover are fused into the elements that make up our Earth. When stars explode with power beyond anything we can imagine on Earth, they scatter these atoms throughout space. And on some fortunate place, like our own planet, a local combination of these stardust atoms leads to interesting new possibilities.
Right now, in places like here at Fermilab, scientists and engineers have created machines powerful enough to imitate these stellar forces.
And using new satellites, like NASA's microwave probe, WMAP, astronomers and cosmologists have been able to see and to make a map of what the universe was like just a few thousand years after the most energetic happening of all time, the Big Bang, the very beginning of the universe itself. As we get closer and closer to that beginning, by satellite and by accelerator, as we speed atoms to energies like those at the center of stars, as we learn how quarks and leptons and neutrinos and still other dark matter combine to make our universe, what will we find? No one knows. Will it be useless moonshine? Well, we do know that atoms make up all that exists, including you and me. Since all atoms on Earth came from the explosion at the center of some long ago star, this means we are made of stardust. And even more surprising, we know it.